Again, I'm going to walk you through the process I went through for creating this application. Then we're going to add in some extra functionality here. First off, let's take a look at some of our input data here. Our satellite data is the Sentinel-2 multispectral instrument, the top level L1C data. Geometry is just a random point I had put on the map there, and these are some visualization parameters I predetermined here. First line of code, just to set the center of the map. So when I click run, it zooms automatically to somewhere right here in the high peaks of the Adirondacks. This next one, I can set the options for my map to start out with terrain, with map, with satellite, with hybrid, really whatever I'd like to see pop up first. But you do have to define it right here in the map. And then I set my map style to be a cursor. And when you have your map style set to a cursor, it just makes the user think that, oh, I've got to click somewhere to make something happen, in which in this case you do. You have to click on the map to have it pull up that most recent satellite image. In this context, this is still the simple application, so 15-mile radius from where I just clicked. And this is imagery from March 21st, so just 4 days ago. Looks like it's still pretty snowy in the Adirondacks there. All right, here we go, getting into the guts of things. Building the user interface. All right, so I'm going to first create a panel that can hold some widgets inside of it. So widgets, as we remember, could be a slider bar, a label, a checkbox, etc. And you can create smaller panels. In this case, I'm creating a smaller panel called slider panel, which will then live inside of a larger panel that will take up sort of the whole right side of my screen. In this case, I have my whole right side of the screen here contains actually 4 separate widgets. The first one is the title right here, which is here in line 14. The second is the subtitle right here in line 15. The third is slider panel, which includes these 2 pieces of information. And the fourth is a printout that occurs when I run my main map function. So what we see here, slider panel is a panel. I'm defining that. I'm then defining a slider bar, which is this guy right here, which I can slide from a minimum of 1 to a max of 50, and that's a value in kilometers. And you can also set a default value just to start with. I also have some text, just slider text, which is UI.label set radius of image window in kilometers. So we add some description right here. I then create a title, and I can use the style function here to make it bold, increase the font size. I can create a subtitle and also manage the font size to make that a little bit bigger than the rest of the text in here. Then I can say, all right, now I want a big panel, panel 1, that's going to sort of take up a big chunk of my map here. So I'm just declaring a UI.panel, and I'm saying these are the widgets I want to have in that panel. I want to have my title, my subtitle, and my slider panel in there. Next, I want to make sure that my panel is 250 pixels wide. I don't want it to be huge. Lastly, I'm going to add it to sort of the root of the map, the UI.root.add. What this does is it means it's not sort of a floating panel hovering on top of the map, but it's sort of pinned to the side, and the map itself starts right where my panel ends, right about here. This we will get to a little bit later, this image num. Essentially, this is declaring I only want the most recent image, the one most recent image from my search. All right, so that's sort of building the user interface. The next step is building a function that occurs when an action is taken on the screen. In our case, the action that's taken on the screen occurs when I click somewhere on the map. Now, in other applications, actions may occur when you change a slider. Let's think back to this app here, the collection slider. When we change the slider, that's where we're firing our function to occur whenever the value of this is changed. In our snow finder, we are asking it to fire a response when we click on the map. So here we are in Horse Heaven, clicking on the map. So what we need to do to create that is we need to designate a function called map.onClick. And this is basically saying whenever you click on the map, run a function. And that function is going to have a variable called coords and is going to look like this. It's going to be inside of this curly bracket here. If we scroll down, we can see that the entire remainder of my script falls inside of that curly bracket and also inside of map.onClick. So whenever we click on our map, we're running everything that's inside these curly brackets. So the first thing that happens is reset the layer. So getting rid of this old Sentinel image from wherever I had clicked before. So when I click here, my function fires again, and I get a new map.layers. Next, I'm clearing everything from my panel so that I sort of get a fresh look. That also clears the image collection date, which is something that occurs later on in the script. I'm then adding those things back into the panel. I'm adding the title back in, adding the subtitle back in, adding the slider panel back in. I'm then coming in and I'm pulling some information from my slider bar. Remember up here, this slider is a variable I'm creating that is a UI slider bar. So down here I can say, okay, I want a variable called distance that converts the value from my slider bar. We have to do slider.getValue, open close parentheses, converting that to a number, and then I'm multiplying it by 1,000. So that's converting this number in kilometers to meters, which is the unit of analysis for all of our Earth Engine functions. Next, what I'm doing is I'm creating a point geometry based on the coordinates from my click. You see this coords.lon, coords.lat. When we do that with this map on click function coords, we're saying where I'm clicking here with this on click, I'm creating a new variable called coords. And that coords variable automatically has a longitude and a latitude that we can access from coords.lon and coords.lat. Now, if we change this word coords to acong, this could be function acong, this could be acong.long, acong.lat. The coords doesn't matter as much as that it matches what's in here and then has this .lon and .lat. With a longitude and latitude, we can create a point then. We can then buffer that point based on the distance. So we can create sort of a donut around our point for which we're going to pull our imagery. I'm then going to center my map on that point. So automatically, whenever I click somewhere new, we will pan over and their map will get centered on that view. And then I'm going to filter my image. So I'm going to filter my Sentinel collection based on the location of that point. So get me every image that overlaps this point. Then, add a little enter mark here. Then sort that image based on the system index property. And the system index property refers to the time that the imagery was collected. False refers to it being ascending. And then what this last bit does is I'm saying, okay, now you have this image collection. Send that to a list. Turn a collection of images into a list of images. And we just need to do this for weird Earth Engine functionality. I'm saying send it to a list that's as long as this variable img num, image num. Now you remember where that came from last? Here we are, image num. So image num I've set to 1. If I wanted to say change this app so that it got the 5 most recent images from a collection, I would change this image num from 1 to 5. For our purposes, we're keeping it just as 1, so we're just getting the single most recent image. What we're then doing is we are extracting here, and this is kind of a long, convoluted way of doing this, but we're saying let's start right in the middle here. From IMG, from that single image, the most recent image, get the first position, which is the 0, convert that to an image, and then get the system time start. And then we are converting that into a date and formatting it here. It's all kind of stacked up on itself, but what this does is it extracts that date in sort of a usable format. Otherwise, it would be in the form of milliseconds from 1970, which is not particularly friendly for most of us to interpret. This next line of code here takes that date and runs a function on it. And this evaluate code allows that function to occur asynchronously. That is, this function, which takes some time to calculate, is occurring on a Google server while other processes are occurring. If we ran a synchronous function, this would need to happen first before any other steps occurred. So date.evaluate, and then we're creating a function with a variable called dater, and we're creating a new date. We're replacing a piece of text with a T in it with a space, a dash, and a space. When we look at it over here, here's that space dash space. Otherwise, if we didn't do that, this would show up as 2020-03-21, capital T 160100. And it's just like a little bit confusing. So I just wanted to create a new version of that date and add that onto the panel through this evaluate tab. So I have some date text, image collection date, and then add this variable date1. So panel1.add date text, image collection date, which we see right here, and panel1.add UI.label date1, which is this this date printed out here. So we can see this is March 21st, 2020 when this was collected. We then take that that filtered image that we collected. Since it's just one image, it doesn't really matter that we're taking the mean of it, but we still have to do this to be able to map it. And then I'm clipping that image based on the buffer, which is also based on this radius here. And then I'm dividing it by 10,000. The reflectance values in Sentinel are sort of scaled 0 to 10,000. It makes it much easier to scale them 0 to 1 for visualization, which is why I add this divide by 10,000 bit of code. I then create a visualization saying set opacity to 1, make everything opaque. Use these bands with a min and a max of 1. And a gamma value, sort of a brightening factor of 1.7. Finally, within my function, I say the last thing you do after I click here, and you run all this other stuff, is add this layer, image clip, with this visualization and this title onto the map, which is what we see here. So that's sort of the walkthrough of everything that I did to build this quite simple app. In the next video, I'll go over adding some additional functionality.